On Father's Day, my son handed his father-in-law the keys to a $50,000 truck. Then he gave me a $15 watch, the kind you grab last minute at a discount bin near the checkout line. I smiled, thanked him, swallowed hard. A week later, he called me 47 times, screaming into my voicemail, "Dad, don't do this!" But it was already done, and there was no turning back. Before we continue, we ask you to hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. The restaurant was one of those upscale places where they give you 3 shrimp on a white plate and call it cuisine. Blake had picked it, said it was special, said we needed to celebrate Father's Day right this year. I should have known something was wrong when Haley smiled at me in the parking lot. We sat at a round table near the window overlooking the harbor. Ellen squeezed my hand under the tablecloth. She knew. Women always know before men do. Richard Stetson sat across from me, filling the space like he owned it. Probably thought he did. Guy wore a blazer to a Sunday lunch. His wife, Patricia, barely spoke, just nodded at everything he said like one of those dashboard bobbleheads. Blake was nervous. I could see it in the way he kept adjusting his collar, glancing at Richard, then at Haley. My son, 33 years old and still looking for approval like a puppy waiting for a treat. "So, Norm," Richard said, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. "Still at the factory?" "Harrington Steelworks," I said. 26 years now. Good, good. Steady work." He said it the way you'd compliment a janitor for showing up on time. "Blake here's been doing great at the distribution center. Just got another promotion." Blake flushed red. "It's not that big a deal." "Nonsense," Richard boomed, his voice carrying across the dining room. "You're management now. That's something. That's real something." The food came in waves. Appetizers I couldn't pronounce. Salads with ingredients I didn't recognize. Ellen asked polite questions about Richard's construction business. I watched Blake avoid my eyes, studying his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Richard talked about his latest projects: a residential development in Cape Elizabeth, a commercial plaza in Scarborough, a municipal contract for a new fire station. Big money, the kind that came with political handshakes and country club connections. "The key," Richard said, jabbing his fork in the air, "is knowing people. Having the right relationships. That's what separates the successful from the struggling." He looked at me when he said struggling. Not obvious. Just a flick of his eyes, but I caught it. Then came dessert, and the gifts. "Before we finish," Blake said, standing up. His voice cracked slightly, his hands trembled. "I wanted to do something special for both of the fathers in my life." My gut clenched. Something in his tone. Something rehearsed. He pulled out 2 boxes from under his chair. One was large, wrapped in expensive paper with a real silk ribbon. The other was small, wrapped in grocery store paper with a stick-on bow that was already peeling at one corner. Blake handed the large one to Richard first. Richard opened it slowly, playing it up for his audience. Inside was a leather case, the kind that comes from high-end stores. He opened that too, his eyebrows rising in theatrical surprise. "Car keys?" Richard looked genuinely confused for once. "Outside," Blake said, grinning now, full teeth. "The blue one." We all went outside into the June sunshine. The parking lot smelled like hot asphalt and salt air. There, in the first row, sat a brand-new Ford F-350. Crew cab, King Ranch package, chrome bumpers catching the light like a showroom display. The kind of truck that costs more than I make in a year. Richard actually whooped. A sound I didn't think men his age made. He grabbed Blake in a bear hug, lifting him off the ground. "Son, you didn't have to do this. You've done so much for us," Blake said, his voice muffled against Richard's shoulder. "For me and Haley, this is nothing compared to that." Patricia clapped her hands together. Haley beamed like she'd just won something. Ellen's hand found mine again, tighter this time, her nails pressing into my palm. Richard walked around the truck, running his hands over the paint, opening doors, checking the interior. He looked like a kid on Christmas morning. "Norm," Blake said, turning to me finally. He held out the small box. His eyes didn't quite meet mine. "For you." I took it. The wrapping paper was thin. I could feel the shape of what was inside before I even opened it. I knew. Somehow I already knew. Inside was a watch, digital, plastic band, basic LCD display showing time, date, and temperature. The price sticker was still on the back. $14.99. From a pharmacy chain. "It's waterproof," Blake said quickly. Too quickly. "I know you work with your hands. Thought it'd be practical." "Thank you," I said. My voice sounded far away, like it was coming from underwater. "It's perfect." Richard clapped Blake on the shoulder, his big hand engulfing my son's frame. "You've got a real family now, son." The word echoed. Now. As if I hadn't been family before. As if Ellen and I were some kind of trial period that had finally expired. As if 26 years of working doubles to pay for Blake's braces and college and that used Honda he wrecked junior year meant nothing. Haley smiled at me. It wasn't kind. It was the smile of someone watching exactly what they wanted to happen. We said our goodbyes in the parking lot. Richard drove off in his new truck, horn honking. Blake and Haley left in their Audi. Ellen and I walked to our 12-year-old Civic in silence. We drove home without speaking. The watch sat in my lap, still in its cheap box. Ellen stared out the passenger window at the passing scenery. Her jaw was tight. I knew that look. She was thinking, processing, getting angry in that quiet, dangerous way she had. We lived in a small Cape Cod in East Bayside. Nothing fancy. We'd bought it 30 years ago when the neighborhood was rough. Now it was emerging, which meant young professionals were moving in and complaining about our fence. Inside, Ellen closed the door and locked it. Then she turned to me. "He treats his image better than he treats you," she said. I set the watch on the kitchen table. It looked cheap in the overhead light. Looked exactly like what it was. A last-minute afterthought. An obligation fulfilled with minimum effort. "It's fine," I said. "No." Ellen's voice was hard, sharp enough to cut. "It's not fine, and you know it." I did know it. I'd known it for years, really. Known it every time Blake canceled Sunday dinner because Richard invited them to the lake house. Known it every time Haley made comments about our neighborhood, our car, our lives. Known it in the way Blake started calling me by my first name instead of Dad 2 years ago. Just Norm. Like we were co-workers. But knowing and admitting are different things. Knowing you can swallow. Admitting makes it real. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. Ellen looked at me for a long time. Her eyes were wet, but no tears fell. Ellen didn't cry. Not anymore. "I want you to stop pretending this doesn't hurt." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Ellen breathe beside me. The watch sat on my nightstand, its display glowing faintly in the dark. 3:17 a.m. I kept thinking about that truck. $50,000 minimum, maybe 60 with all the options. Blake had told me 3 months ago he couldn't help with Ellen's medical bills from her gallbladder surgery. Said things were tight. Said the economy was rough. Said he'd help if he could, but his own expenses were crushing him. I got up, careful not to wake Ellen. Went to the garage, turned on the fluorescent lights. They hummed and flickered before catching. My tools hung on the pegboard, organized by size, everything in its place, everything earned. Wrenches, sockets, screwdrivers, pliers. Some were older than Blake. Some I'd bought before he was born. I'd bought this house 30 years ago. Paid it off in 23, raised Blake here, taught him to change a tire in this garage, taught him to check the oil, replace brake pads, read a level, use a circular saw. Taught him that a man takes care of his tools and his tools take care of him. He'd forgotten all of it. Or worse, he remembered and didn't care. I picked up a wrench, felt its weight, solid, reliable, honest. A wrench didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. It did its job or it didn't. No middle ground. I wanted to throw it through something, wanted to hear glass shatter. But I didn't. I just stood there, holding it, feeling the cold metal against my palm. Then I put it back exactly where it belonged. Monday morning came too early. My back hurt from sleeping wrong, that old injury from when a hydraulic lift failed back in '09. The alarm went off at 4:30, same as always. Ellen was already up, making coffee in the kitchen. She was always up first, said she liked the quiet before the world started demanding things. "You okay?" she asked, not looking at me. "Yeah." She didn't believe me, handed me a travel mug and kissed my cheek. Her lips were warm. "Be careful today." "Always am." Harrington Steelworks squatted on the edge of Portland like a rusted cathedral. 3 warehouses, 2 fabrication floors, 1 maintenance bay. The place had been there since the '40s, old brick buildings with high windows and floors stained with decades of oil and metal shavings. I'd worked every station over the years, finally landing in maintenance 5 years back when my knees started complaining about the ladder work. Suited me. Machines made sense. They did what they were built to do. No lies, no games. A bearing was good or it wasn't. A motor ran or it didn't. Everything had a cause and an effect, action and reaction. I clocked in at 5:15. Jerry was already there, drinking coffee from a battered thermos he'd had since before I started. Guy was older than me, close to retirement, barely spoke but could diagnose a failing machine by sound alone. "Norm," he nodded. "Jerry." We didn't need more words than that. 20 years working together taught you a language beyond speech. A nod meant agreement. A grunt meant trouble. Silence meant everything was running smooth. The new supervisor showed up at 6. Trevor Dunn. 28 years old, fresh MBA from some school I'd never heard of, never worked a real shift in his life. Corporate sent him to optimize efficiency, whatever that meant. Mostly, it meant more paperwork and less actual work getting done. "Morning, gentlemen," Trevor said, too loud, too cheerful for a Monday. "Let's talk about today's priorities." He had a clipboard. Everything with Trevor involved a clipboard. Forms, checklists, performance metrics. Kid probably had a form for taking a drink of water. Jerry and I listened to him explain how we should reorganize the tool inventory, how we should log maintenance checks digitally instead of on paper, how we should reduce our break time by 5 minutes to increase productivity, how we should attend a mandatory safety seminar on Friday, even though both of us had perfect safety records going back decades. "Any questions?" Trevor asked, his pen poised over his clipboard. "Yeah," I said. "Who's going to fix the hydraulic press on line 2 when it goes down because we're too busy filling out forms to notice the pressure gauge?" Trevor's smile tightened like a screw turning. "That's what preventive maintenance schedules are for, Norm. Preventive maintenance requires walking the floor, listening, watching, feeling vibrations, not staring at a computer screen." "Let's try the new system," Trevor said. His tone left no room for argument. "That's what progress looks like." Progress. Same word Blake used when he explained why he couldn't visit anymore, why Sunday dinners didn't fit his schedule, why his new life required distance from his old one. Progress meant leaving things behind, meant people behind. I went back to work. The morning passed in grease and metal, the familiar rhythm of maintenance. I replaced a bearing assembly on line 3, the old one grinding itself to pieces. Recalibrated the temperature sensors on the forge after they started reading 20 degrees hot. Fixed a stuck valve that nobody else could diagnose because they didn't understand that sometimes valves stuck for mechanical reasons and sometimes they stuck because some genius had painted over them during the last facility's refresh. The work was meditative, hands busy, mind quiet, or trying to be quiet. But my thoughts kept drifting back to Sunday, to that watch, to Blake's face when he handed it to me, that expression that wasn't quite guilt and wasn't quite indifference. Something in between, something worse. At lunch, I sat in my truck with the windows down, ate the sandwich Ellen packed, turkey and Swiss on wheat, an apple, a granola bar, same lunch I'd eaten for 20 years. Checked my phone, no messages from Blake, no surprise there. He only called when he needed something, needed me to sign something, needed a tool he'd borrowed and never returned, needed advice he wouldn't take. I scrolled through my contacts, found Richard Stetson's construction company website, Stetson Construction and Supply. The homepage loaded slowly on my old phone. There was Richard in a hard hat, arms crossed, standing in front of an excavator. Professional photo, professional smile. Building Maine's future, the tagline read. I clicked through to their projects page. Residential developments, commercial buildings, municipal contracts. Big money, real money. The kind that required connections, permits, inspections, lawyers, accountants. The kind that looked clean on the surface but always had dirt underneath if you knew where to dig. I put the phone away, finished my sandwich, went back inside. At 3 o'clock, the hydraulic press on line 2 started making a noise like an injured creature, a rhythmic squeal that grew louder with every cycle. Trevor was in his office, doing whatever supervisors do, probably filling out reports about how efficient we were. I grabbed Jerry. Didn't need to explain. He'd heard it too. Yep, was all he said. We shut down the line, approached the press carefully. These machines could take your hand off if you weren't careful, could crush you if something failed at the wrong moment. I'd seen it happen once back in the 90s. Guy named Pete. Lost 3 fingers because he thought he could beat the safety lockout. The sound was coming from the main cylinder. I checked the pressure gauge. Normal. Checked the hydraulic fluid reservoir. Full. Checked the lines running from the reservoir to the cylinder, tracing each one with my eyes and hands. There. A hairline crack in the high-pressure hose. Invisible unless you were looking for it, but big enough to cause cavitation. Air getting into the system, making it scream. Another week and the hose would have blown, sending hydraulic fluid everywhere at 3,000 psi. Could have taken someone's arm off. Could have sprayed hot fluid into someone's eyes. Good catch, Jerry said. Just listening. We shut down the hydraulic system, drained the line, replaced the hose with a new one from inventory, tested the system 3 times before we brought the line back up. The press ran smooth, silent except for the normal mechanical sounds. Trevor never even knew there was a problem. Would probably take credit for 0 downtime in his next efficiency report. I thought about Blake again. Wondered if he ever gave me credit for anything. Probably not. Probably told Richard stories about how he pulled himself up. Self-made man. Never mentioned the 26 years I spent making sure he had everything he needed. Never mentioned the overtime shifts so he could go to summer camp. Never mentioned the loan I took out so he could finish college after he lost his scholarship. The shift ended at 6. I clocked out, drove home through rush hour traffic. The sunset painted the sky orange and purple over Casco Bay. Beautiful, if you had time to notice. I didn't. I was thinking about that watch, about Blake's face, about Richard's hand on Blake's shoulder. Ellen was already home. I could smell dinner cooking before I opened the door. Chicken, garlic, rosemary. She worked crazy hours at the clinic, sometimes 12-hour shifts dealing with sick people and insurance companies and electronic medical records that crashed at the worst possible times. But she still made time for real food. Not takeout, not microwave meals. Real food that took effort. How was work? She asked when I came in. Fine. She studied my face while stirring something on the stove. You're thinking about it. About what? About Sunday. I washed my hands at the kitchen sink. The cheap watch was still on the table where I'd left it. I picked it up, turned it over. Made in China. Plastic, everything. The second hand ticked with a faint stutter, like it was struggling to keep time. "I'm fine," I said. "Norm." Ellen's voice was soft but firm, the voice she used with difficult patience. "You're not fine, and that's okay. You're allowed to not be fine." I set the watch down, looked at her, really looked at her. She'd aged well, 61 but looked 50. Sharp eyes, gray hair she wore short, strong hands from years of medical work. She'd been with me through everything, through the hard years when we couldn't afford anything, through Blake's childhood, through my father's decline and burial, through her mother's long goodbye to dementia. Through all of it, she'd been there. "What do you want me to say?" I asked. "That you're angry? That you're hurt? That you're not going to just swallow this and pretend it didn't happen? And then what? What good does saying it do?" She smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile she got when she'd made a decision. "Then we figure out what to do about it." We ate dinner. Chicken, roasted vegetables, brown rice. We didn't talk about Blake. Talked about her day instead. A patient who refused to take medication. An insurance company that denied a necessary test. Normal complaints, normal frustrations. The background noise of life. After dinner, Ellen cleared the table. Brought out 2 cups of coffee and a yellow legal pad. She was good at this. Organized thinking. Medical training, she said. Break down the problem, identify the variables, create a treatment plan. "Let's start with what we know," she said, pen ready. "Blake gave me a $15 watch and Richard a $50,000 truck. Why? Because Richard's important and I'm not. Deeper than that. Why is Richard important to Blake?" I thought about it. Tried to think like Blake. Tried to see the world through his eyes. Money, status. Richard's got both. Blake wants both. And how does Blake get those things from Richard? By being the son Richard wants. The one who fits into his world. The one who wears the right clothes and says the right things and doesn't embarrass him at the country club. Ellen wrote it down. Her handwriting was precise, each letter perfectly formed. "And you?" "I'm the embarrassment. The factory worker. The guy with grease under his fingernails. The reminder of where Blake came from." She nodded. "So Blake's trying to erase his past to secure his future." "Yeah. That's the wound," Ellen said. "Now, let's talk about the weapon." I looked at her. "Weapon?" "Richard Stetson." She tapped the pen on the pad. "Blake's hitched his wagon to that man. Everything Blake wants flows through Richard. Richard's approval, Richard's connections, Richard's money. So if we want to make Blake understand what he's done, we don't go after Blake. We go after Richard." "You're talking about revenge." "I'm talking about consequences," Ellen said. "Blake needs to learn that actions have consequences, that you can't treat people like garbage without it coming back around. Right now he thinks he can do whatever he wants because Daddy will just take it. We're going to teach him different." "How?" Ellen smiled, that smile again. "That's what we're going to figure out." We stayed up late, past midnight, talking through possibilities. Ellen asked questions. I answered. Slowly, piece by piece, a picture emerged. Richard Stetson ran a construction company. Construction meant permits, inspections, regulations. It meant OSHA compliance, environmental rules, zoning laws. It meant insurance, liability, worker safety. It meant building codes and engineering requirements. It meant 1,000 ways to do things right and 1,000 shortcuts to save money. "Do you think Richard cuts corners?" Ellen asked. "Guys like Richard always cut corners. They think rules are for other people. They think if you know the right people, if you make the right donations, you can get away with anything. So we find the corners he's cut, document them, use them." "That's a lot of work," I said. "And I'm not a detective. I don't know how to investigate someone." No, Ellen said. But you're a mechanic. You know how things are supposed to work. You know what happens when people skip steps. You know what safety violations look like because you see them every day at Harrington. She had a point. And, she added, you know the industrial side of Portland. Richard's projects have to intersect with your world somewhere. Same suppliers, same inspectors, same building community. Everyone knows everyone. I thought about it. Harrington Steelworks was near the waterfront. So were half of Richard's developments. The industrial district, the old rail yards, the supplier warehouses, the fabrication shops, all connected, all talking to each other. I could look around, I said slowly. Not just look, investigate, talk to people, see what people are saying about Stetson construction. Every contractor has enemies, every company has people they've screwed over. Find those people. And if I find something? Ellen's eyes were hard as stones. Then we decide how to use it. Over the next 2 days, I started paying attention differently. At work, during breaks, I listened to conversations. Jerry knew a guy who worked for a paving contractor. That guy knew someone at the county inspector's office. Everyone in the trades knew everyone else. Portland wasn't that big. 6 degrees of separation, maybe 3 if you'd been around long enough. I heard things. Small things. Pieces of a puzzle. Stetson Construction had failed an inspection last month. Rebar spacing on a foundation poor for a residential project in Cape Elizabeth. Too much space between the bars, weakening the structure. They'd fixed it and passed the re-inspection, but it cost them time and money. Richard had reportedly thrown a fit, threatened to sue the inspector, made phone calls to someone at the city. One of Richard's framers had quit suddenly. Guy named Tommy something. Told people the site was unsafe. Nobody took it seriously. Framers complained about everything. But then 2 more guys from that crew quit the same week. That was unusual. You don't lose 3 good workers without a reason. Richard had underbid a municipal project by 30%, got the contract, then made up the difference by using cheaper materials than specified. Substituted standard-grade lumber for premium, substituted basic fixtures for commercial grade. Small changes, nothing that would fail inspection if the inspector didn't know what to look for, but changes that saved thousands of dollars. Nothing illegal necessarily, but patterns, and patterns told a story. On Wednesday afternoon, I had to pick up parts from Delaney Supply, a massive warehouse near the port. I'd been there 100 times. Knew the manager, Frank Delaney, from trade shows and supplier meetings. Frank was about my age, ran the place with his 2 sons. Good guy. Honest. The kind who'd give you a fair price and straight answers. Norm, Frank said when I walked in. The warehouse smelled like metal and cardboard and industrial cleaner. Been a minute. Busy season. Always is. He pulled my order from behind the counter. Bearings, gaskets, and hydraulic fittings, right? Right. We talked while he boxed everything up. Frank was a talker, always had been, knew everyone's business because everyone came through his shop eventually. Plumbers, electricians, contractors, mechanics. All of us needed parts at some point. You hear about Stetson Construction? He asked, wrapping the gaskets in brown paper. My heart rate jumped, but I kept my face neutral. What about them? Big drama. They built this staging warehouse without permits. Just threw it up on some empty land, figured nobody would notice. You know how it is. Start using a place. After a while, people think you own it. County finally caught wind of it. Now they're scrambling to get it legitimized, trying to do retroactive permits and all that. Where's the warehouse? Down by the rail yards, near the old textile mill. You know that area? I knew that area. Used to cut through there on my way to work, back before they built the bypass. Swampy land mostly. Abandoned industrial lots, a few functioning warehouses, railroad tracks that hadn't seen a train in 20 years. Whose land? I asked, trying to sound casual. Frank shrugged, rang up my order on an ancient computer. Don't know, but whoever owns it is probably furious. You don't just build on someone's property without asking. That's trespassing at minimum, maybe theft of use or something. I'm not a lawyer, but it's bad news. Yeah, I said. Richard's trying to buy his way out of it, Frank continued. Heard he's offering to pay rent retroactively, trying to make it look like an honest mistake. But the word is, the owner isn't interested, wants the whole thing torn down. Huh. I paid for the parts. Frank loaded them into my truck. We said goodbye. I drove back to Harrington, unloaded everything, but my mind was racing. The rail yards, near the textile mill, swampy land. I knew that land. That night, after Ellen was asleep, I went to the filing cabinet in our spare bedroom. Ellen called it my paper graveyard. Every receipt, every document, every deed and contract I'd ever signed, organized in manila folders by year and category. Some people thought I was paranoid, but paperwork mattered, proof mattered. You couldn't argue with documents. I found what I was looking for in a folder marked Real Estate, 2004. 21 years ago, a buddy from work had owed me money, guy named Phil Torres. We'd done side jobs together, fixing equipment for small businesses. Phil got in over his head, owed me close to $8,000 for parts and tools I'd bought. He couldn't pay cash, so he offered me a piece of land instead. Said it was worthless. Swampy, near the rail yards, no development potential. Probably never would be. I took it anyway. Figured land was land. At least it was something. Paid to have it surveyed, got the deed transferred, filed it away, and forgot about it. I pulled out the survey map, unfolded it on the desk. The paper was yellowed, but the ink was still clear. Traced the boundaries with my finger. 1.3 acres. Irregular shape, like someone had drawn property lines drunk, bordered by the old rail spur on one side, city utility easement on the other, swamp on the third, and an abandoned textile mill on the fourth. Worthless land. That's what Phil had said. Except someone had built a warehouse on it. I spent the next hour going through every document. The original deed, the survey, the tax records. All of it showing Norman Havelock as the legal owner of Lot 47B in the industrial district near the port. I'd been paying property taxes on it for 21 years. Not much, maybe $300 a year. Cheap enough that I never thought about it. Just paid the bill when it came and filed the receipt. But it was mine, legal and clear. And Richard Stetson had built on my land without permission. I sat back in the chair, felt something shift in my chest. Not anger exactly. Something colder, more focused. Ellen appeared in the doorway, wearing her robe. "What are you doing?" "Research." She came over, looked at the documents spread across the desk. "What is this?" "I own land down by the rail yards. Bought it 21 years ago. Forgot I had it." "And?" "And Richard Stetson built a warehouse on it." Ellen was quiet for a moment, then she started to smile. That smile. "How big a warehouse?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." Thursday morning, I called in sick. First time in 3 years. Trevor would probably mark it on his clipboard. I didn't care. Ellen had already left for the clinic. She'd left a note. "Be smart. Document everything." I made coffee, then drove to the industrial district. The rail yards looked worse than I remembered. Weeds through cracked asphalt, rusted fences, a few functioning warehouses, but mostly abandonment. I found Lot 47B using the survey map. Pulled off onto a dirt access road, parked behind some bushes. The warehouse sat in the middle of my property, large, maybe 40 by 60, metal construction, new, 3 Stetson construction trucks parked outside. I watched from behind an old concrete barrier. The place was active, guys going in and out, moving materials, loading trucks, using my land like they owned it. I took photos with my phone. The warehouse from multiple angles, the trucks with their logos, the materials, the electrical line. Everything documented. After 20 minutes, the workers took a break. I approached the building, walked the perimeter, took more photos, quality construction, Richard didn't skimp on his own storage. On the back side, I found a county notice stapled to a post. Unauthorized structure, violation notice, dated 3 weeks ago. Below that, a response from Richard's lawyer, claiming the matter was being resolved. I photographed everything. Back in my truck, I sat thinking. This wasn't just a shortcut. Richard had deliberately built on land he didn't own, used it for months. How much money had he saved by not buying or leasing land properly? I drove to the county offices downtown. The clerk at the permit desk was a woman about Ellen's age, tired eyes behind reading glasses. "I need information about a property," I said. "Lot 47B in the industrial district." She typed on her computer. "What kind of information? Any permits filed? Any violations? Building records?" She looked at me. "Are you the owner?" "Yes." "ID, please." I showed her my driver's license. She nodded and typed more. "There's an active violation," she said. "Unauthorized structure. Filed 3 weeks ago by Inspector Thomas Davis. There's also a pending permit application filed by Stetson Construction and Supply." "What's the application for?" "Retroactive building permit for a storage warehouse. Also a land lease agreement request, but that requires owner approval." "Has the owner approved?" She looked at me over her glasses. "You're the owner. Have you approved?" No one's contacted me." She made a note. "Then the application is incomplete. It'll be denied." "What happens to the building?" "If the permit is denied and no lease is established, the structure is illegal. Owner can demand removal. If the builder refuses, owner can get a court order and charge the builder for costs." "How much?" "For that size? 30 to 50,000, plus legal fees." I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. "Thank you," I said. She printed copies of the violation notice and permit application. I folded them carefully and put them in my jacket. I called Ellen from the parking lot. "Richard built that warehouse without asking. Now he's trying to legitimize it after the fact. He needs my permission." "What happens if you refuse?" "He tears it down. Costs him 30 to 50,000. Ellen was quiet. "Don't do anything yet. Don't contact Richard or Blake. Let them come to you." "Why?" "Because right now they don't know you know. That's power. Once they realize you hold the cards, they'll try to negotiate. But if you go to them first, you lose the advantage." "How long do I wait?" "Until they're desperate." That evening, Blake called. I let it go to voicemail. Ellen and I listened on speaker. "Hey, Dad, something's come up. Richard's dealing with some property issue. He mentioned you might know something about land near the rail yards. Can you call me? It's kind of urgent." Ellen raised her eyebrows. That was faster than I thought. "Should I call back?" "No, make him wait." Blake called 3 more times the next day. I didn't answer. Friday night, he showed up at our house. I was in the garage when Ellen called me inside. Blake stood in our living room, tense. He'd dressed down, jeans and a polo, trying to seem approachable. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" He glanced at Ellen. "Can we talk alone?" "Ellen stays," I said. "Whatever you have to say it in front of her." Blake swallowed. "Okay. So, Richard's company built a warehouse down by the rail yards. The county's saying it's on private land. We looked up the records and... You own that land?" "I do." "Since when?" 21 years. Blake blinked. "You never mentioned it. You never asked. Never seemed interested in anything about my life." He flinched. "Right. Well, Richard needs that land. Or permission to keep the warehouse there. It's crucial for his operations. If he has to tear it down, it'll cost him a fortune." "How much?" Blake hesitated. 50,000. Maybe more. Plus he'd lose the business advantage. So Richard wanted me to ask if you'd sell the land, or lease it. He's offering 15,000 for a 5-year lease. I almost laughed. 15,000 after using my land for months, after avoiding 50,000 in costs. "No," I said. Blake's face went red. "Dad, be reasonable. That's good money for worthless land. Not worthless to Richard. You're really going to do this? Over what? A Father's Day gift? You're still mad about that watch? This has nothing to do with a watch. Then what? What do you want? It has to do with respect, something you wouldn't understand. Blake's voice rose. Richard's been good to me, to us. He gave us opportunities, connections, a real future, things you never could have given me. The words hung in the air. And I gave you 26 years, I said quietly. Where's my truck, Blake? He went pale. That was different. How? Richard earned it. He's been there for me. And I haven't? You're just a mechanic, Dad. The words landed like a punch. Ellen gasped. Get out, I said quietly. Dad, get out of my house. The land is mine. Richard can tear down his warehouse or I'll have the county do it. Now leave. Blake stared, disbelief on his face. Finally, he turned and walked out. Slammed the door. His car peeled out of the driveway. Ellen touched my shoulder. That went well. Just getting started, I said. Over the weekend I made phone calls, used contacts from 26 years in the trades. Everyone knew someone. Everyone owed someone a favor. I called Danny Morrison, a foreman with a competing contractor. I need information about Richard Stetson's operation, off the record. That piece of work has been undercutting honest contractors for years, Danny said. What do you want to know? Everything. Danny told me about lumber substitutions, how Richard would bid premium materials, then substitute standard grade during construction. Saved thousands per project. He told me about safety violations, missing guardrails, improper scaffolding, guys working without proper harnesses. He told me about subcontractor disputes, how Richard would delay payments, find reasons to reduce them, nickel and dime guys until they ate the loss. Why hasn't anyone reported this? I asked. Some tried, but Richard's got connections, city council, planning board, he makes donations, knows how to work the system, complaints disappear. I called Mike Garrison, an electrician who'd worked Stetson projects. The code violations are constant, Mike told me. Undersized wire, improper grounding, junction boxes hidden behind drywall. I refused to work for him after the third project. By Sunday evening, I had a list, not just complaints, actual violations, names and dates and locations. Monday morning, Inspector Davis called me. Mr. Havelock, I'm the inspector who filed the violation on your property. I've been trying to enforce it for 3 weeks, but I keep hitting political resistance. What kind? Stetson's attorney has been calling my supervisor, making noise about how this is just paperwork. My boss is getting pressure to let it slide. What if I apply different pressure? File a formal complaint? Make noise? Then it becomes harder to ignore. Right now, it's just me pushing. But if the property owner makes a stink, especially with documentation, that changes things. What if there were other violations? A pattern? Davis paused. That would interest the state board. They don't care about local politics. If you've got evidence of systematic violations, they'd investigate. I told him what I'd learned, the lumber substitutions, the safety issues, the subcontractor problems. Get me documentation, Davis said. Names, dates, locations. I'll pass it to the state. They'll have to investigate. That afternoon, Ellen came home with 3 names. A lawyer specializing in property disputes, a journalist at the Portland Press-Herald, a state building inspector who'd testified in fraud cases. I contacted all 3. The lawyer said I had grounds for a lawsuit, trespassing, unauthorized use, possibly fraud. The journalist was interested, said he'd been hearing rumors about Stetson construction but couldn't confirm anything. The state inspector said if I filed a formal complaint with the state board, they'd have to investigate regardless of local politics. How long? I asked. 2 weeks for preliminary review, month for full investigation if they find cause. Wednesday morning, I filed the complaint, included photos, documents, Inspector Davis's contact information, everything organized in a clean package. Blake called that afternoon. I answered. "What did you do?" He was shouting. State inspectors showed up at Richard's office. They're auditing everything. Every project, every permit, every contract. I filed a complaint. You're destroying his business. I'm protecting my property. This is insane. Over a stupid watch. Over respect, Blake. Something you don't understand. Richard's talking about suing you. Let him. I've got lawyers too. Dad, please. You're ruining everything. Richard's threatening to cut ties with me. Haley's furious. Should have thought about that before you humiliated me. That's what this is about? You're willing to destroy my marriage, my career, over a gift? No, Blake. You destroyed those things. I'm just making sure you understand consequences. I hung up. Ellen came home with wine. We sat on the back porch, watching the sunset. How do you feel? She asked. Good. For the first time in years, I feel good. The state investigation moved fast. By Friday, they'd found violations at 4 Stetson projects. Structural issues, missing permits, falsified inspection reports. Richard's lawyer called me Tuesday morning. Mr. Stetson would like to meet, discuss a resolution. Where? I asked. His office. No, public place, Harrington Steelworks parking lot, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. There was a pause. He'll be there. I told Jerry what was happening. He nodded. Want backup? Just your presence. Wednesday morning, Richard arrived in his new truck. Blake drove separately, looking like he hadn't slept. Both parked and approached where I stood next to my Civic. Jerry leaned against his pickup nearby, arms crossed. Ellen sat in our car, watching. Richard approached, trying to smile. His face was drawn, tired. Norm, good to see you. Richard, look, this got out of hand. The state investigation, the complaints. I think we can work this out like reasonable men. I'm listening. I'll pay fair market value for your land. $75,000? That's generous for property that size. No. Richard's smile faltered. $100,000 then. Cash. Clean sale. No. What do you want? Name your price. I pulled out a folder, the one I'd been preparing all week, handed it to him. These are records of every violation the state found, every shortcut, every falsified report, every corner you cut. I've got copies with 3 lawyers, 2 journalists, and the state attorney general's office. Richard opened the folder. His face went white as he read. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to remove the warehouse from my property within 30 days. You're going to pay for removal. You're going to make every violation right on every project the state flagged. You're going to stop cutting corners. That'll cost millions. Should have thought about that before you built on my land. Richard looked at Blake. This is your father? You let him do this to me? Blake said nothing, just stood there, defeated. And one more thing, I said. Blake works for you, right? Management position? Yes. Fire him. Blake's head snapped up. What? Fire him. Today. Give him 2 weeks severance and let him go. Dad, you can't. You want me to bury these violations? I asked Richard. You want me to withdraw my complaints? Fire him. Richard looked between us, then nodded slowly. Done. Blake's face crumpled. Richard, please, I can explain. You brought this problem into my family, Richard said coldly. Your father's right. You're done. Richard walked back to his truck, started the engine, drove away without looking back. Blake stood there, shaking. Why would you do that? I have a mortgage. Bills. Haley's going to... You wanted to be part of his family instead of mine. Now you're part of neither. I have nothing. Should have thought about that before you decided I was just a mechanic. It was just a watch. It was 26 years of being invisible. 26 years of being the embarrassment you wanted to erase. You made your choice. Now live with it. I got in my car. Ellen started the engine. In the rearview mirror, Blake stood alone in the parking lot. The warehouse came down in 3 days. A demolition crew worked around the clock. Richard paid for everything. Didn't complain, didn't fight. The state investigation continued. More violations surfaced. Richard's company lost 2 major contracts. His insurance rates tripled. His reputation collapsed. Blake called Ellen's phone when mine wouldn't answer. She put him on speaker. We were eating dinner. Haley left me, he said. His voice was hollow. Moved back to her parents. Filed for separation. Richard's refusing to help. Says I'm toxic. What do you want us to do? Ellen asked. I don't know. I thought Dad would stop. I thought this was just to make a point. The point is made, Ellen said. You treated your father like garbage. Now you're learning what that costs. She hung up. More calls came over the next week. Blake was desperate. Lost his apartment. Living with a friend. Couldn't find work because Richard was blacklisting him. I didn't answer. Ellen asked me once if I felt guilty. I told her the truth. No. He needed to learn this lesson. Inspector Davis called with updates. Richard was cooperating, making corrections, paying fines. His business would survive, but barely. You accomplished something, Davis said. Guys like Stetson usually get away with everything. I went back to work, back to normal. Trevor still had his clipboard. Jerry still barely talked. The machines still broke and I still fixed them. But something was different. I walked taller. When Trevor tried to push another useless policy, I pushed back. That's not how this works, I told him. Either we do this right or I talk to corporate about your efficiency numbers, the ones you're faking. Trevor went pale. How did you... I pay attention. He backed down, started listening. The workplace improved. Turned out, people respected strength, respected men who stood up. The cheap watch stayed on my garage workbench, a reminder. Not of what Blake did, but of what I became after. The man who stopped swallowing hurt. The man who demanded respect. The man who understood that revenge wasn't just destruction. Sometimes it was justice. 3 weeks after the warehouse came down, Blake showed up at the house again. Late evening. Rain pouring down like the sky had opened up. I heard the car door slam, then footsteps running toward the porch. Ellen let him in before I could stop her. When I came out of the garage, Blake was standing in our entryway, soaked through. Water dripped from his hair onto our floor. He looked terrible, thinner, dark circles under his eyes, clothes that needed washing. The smell of desperation hung on him like cheap cologne. I need help, he said without preamble. You need money, I corrected, staying in the doorway between the kitchen and living room. Yes, I can't find work. No one will hire me. Richard's poisoned the entire network. I'm applying for retail jobs, warehouse positions, anything. Getting rejected everywhere. I've got nothing left. Ellen handed him a towel. He took it but didn't use it. Just held it in his hands like he'd forgotten what it was for. What about Haley's family? I asked. They won't speak to me. Patricia actually hung up when I called. Richard told them I'm the reason his business is struggling, that I brought toxic connections into their family. Haley filed for divorce last week. She wants the house, the car, everything. Sounds familiar, I said quietly. Being erased by your own family. Blake's face twisted with something between anger and pain. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry about the watch. I'm sorry about Father's Day. I'm sorry about calling you just a mechanic. I'm sorry about everything. Is that what you want to hear? I'll say it 100 times if that's what it takes. I want to hear you understand why I did this. Because I hurt you. No, because you forgot who I was. You forgot what I sacrificed for you. Every double shift I worked so you could go to summer camp. Every weekend I spent fixing cars on the side so you could have new clothes for school. Every time I said no to something I wanted so you could have something you needed. Blake was crying now, real tears mixing with rainwater on his face. I know all that now. Do you? Or are you just sorry because your life fell apart? Because the consequences caught up? Would you be here if Richard had kept you employed? If Haley had stayed? If everything was still working out? He didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. Here's what's going to happen, I said, keeping my voice level. You're going to leave. You're going to figure out your own life. You're going to learn what it means to work hard for things, instead of having them handed to you, or manipulating your way into them. Maybe in a few years, if you've actually changed, we'll talk again. A few years? His voice cracked. Dad, I can't survive a few years like this. Sure you can. I survived 26 years of being invisible to you. You can survive a few years of being uncomfortable. Please, I have nowhere to go. I'm staying on a friend's couch. He's getting tired of me being there. I'll be on the street by next week. Ellen stepped forward. She'd been quiet until now, letting me handle it. But her voice cut through the room like a scalpel. There's a shelter on Congress Street. They'll give you a bed and 3 meals. They've got job placement services, too. Real work, construction, landscaping, kitchen staff. The kind of jobs where you clock in, work hard, and earn an honest paycheck. A shelter? Blake looked horrified. You want me to stay in a homeless shelter? I want you to understand what rock bottom feels like, Ellen said, so you appreciate everything you climb back up to. Your father worked construction summers during college, worked in restaurant kitchens, did landscaping. He knows what honest work looks like. You need to learn. Blake turned back to me. You really won't help? Your own son? You stopped being my son when you decided Richard was your real family? When you gave him a truck and me garbage? When you looked me in the eye and said I was just a mechanic, like 26 years of providing for you meant nothing? I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. You meant exactly that. And now you're learning what life looks like when you burn your bridges. Blake stood there shivering, the towel still unused in his hands. He looked at Ellen, then back at me, looking for any crack in our resolve, any weakness he could exploit. He found none. I'm your son, he said one more time. Quieter now, almost pleading. Then act like it. Act like someone I raised, someone with integrity, someone who understands that family isn't about money or status. It's about loyalty, respect, being there when it's hard, not just when it's convenient. Blake opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. What could he say? What argument could he make? Finally, he set the towel on the arm of the couch, turned toward the door. His hand was on the knob when he stopped. The Bitcoin money, he said without turning around. The 6 figures I made selling it. I never told you because I knew you'd ask why I couldn't help with Ellen's medical bills. Truth is, I could have helped. I just didn't want to. Wanted to keep it all for myself. For impressing Richard. For buying into his world. The admission hung in the air. I know, I said. Blake turned, surprised. You knew? Found out a few weeks ago. One more thing you lied about. He nodded slowly. Opened the door. Rain and cold air rushed in. The shelter address, Ellen said. It's 412 Congress Street. They close intake at 9 p.m. You've got 40 minutes. Blake walked out into the rain. Didn't run. Just walked. Shoulders slumped. Defeated. Ellen closed the door. Locked it. Turned to me. That was hard, she said. It was necessary. Think he'll actually go to the shelter? Maybe. Or maybe he'll find another friend's couch, another person to manipulate, another shortcut. I shrugged. Either way, he's not our problem anymore. We went to the kitchen. Ellen made tea. We sat at the table, the same table where that cheap watch had sat the night after Father's Day. The watch was still in the garage, on my workbench. I hadn't moved it. Didn't plan to. You really think he can change? Ellen asked. I don't know. Some people learn. Some people just keep making the same mistakes with different people. We'll see which one Blake is. And if he shows up again? Same answer. Come back when you've learned something. Ellen sipped her tea. You're different now, since all this started. How? Stronger, more confident, Like you finally remembered who you are. I never forgot. I just stopped letting other people convince me I was less than I am. Outside, the rain continued. Somewhere out there, Blake was driving through it, maybe heading to the shelter, maybe not. I'd given him the information. What he did with it was his choice, just like everything else had been his choice. He chose to value Richard over me, chose to give a truck to one man and garbage to another, chose to lie about money while I struggled with medical bills, chose to erase his past to build his future. Now he was learning that choices have consequences. I'd spent 26 years teaching him lessons about responsibility, hard work, integrity. He'd ignored all of them. Maybe this final lesson, the hard one, the painful one, would finally stick. Or maybe it wouldn't. Either way, I'd done my part. I'd been the father I was supposed to be. I'd provided, protected, taught, and loved. The rest was up to him. Ellen reached across the table and took my hand. I'm proud of you. For what? For standing up, for not backing down, for teaching him the lesson he needed even when it hurt. I squeezed her hand. Couldn't have done it without you. Sure you could have, but I'm glad I was here. We finished our tea, cleaned up, went to bed. I slept well that night, better than I had in years. No guilt, no second guessing, no wondering if I'd been too harsh. Blake had made his choices. I'd made mine. The scales were balanced now. Justice, it turned out, felt a lot like peace. The Portland Press-Herald ran the story 2 weeks later. Construction company under fire, Stetson scandal reveals pattern of violations. The journalist had done his homework. Every shortcut, every bribe, every corner Richard had cut. The article mentioned me briefly. Local mechanic Norman Havelock, who owned property Stetson built on without permission, filed the initial complaint that triggered the state investigation. My phone rang all day. Other contractors who'd been hurt by Richard, journalists wanting interviews, a lawyer asking if I wanted to pursue civil damages. I declined everything. The point was made. Richard's company went into bankruptcy protection. Several of his developments were seized by banks. His house went up for sale. His wife divorced him. Blake sent a letter, handwritten, said he was working at a hardware store, living in a small apartment, starting over, said he understood now, said he was sorry. I read the letter once, put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd respond. Not today. Ellen retired from the clinic. We'd saved enough over the years. She wanted to travel, see things, enjoy life. We took a trip to Canada, drove along the coast, stayed in small inns, ate good food. At Harrington, Trevor got reassigned. The new supervisor was older, experienced. Listened to Jerry and me. Things improved. Jerry retired 6 months later. They threw him a party. He gave me his thermos. You earned it, he said. I kept working, enjoyed it more now, found satisfaction in the simplicity of machines and metal and honest work. The cheap watch stayed on my garage workbench, a reminder, not of what Blake did, but of what I became after. The man who stopped swallowing hurt, the man who demanded respect, the man who understood that revenge wasn't always about destruction. Sometimes it was about justice. Sometimes it was about teaching people that actions have consequences. Sometimes it was about reclaiming your dignity. 6 months later, Blake called again. His voice was different, steadier. I've been promoted to assistant manager, he said, at the hardware store. It's not much, but it's honest work. I'm learning. Good. I wanted to ask if maybe we could meet. Just coffee, just to talk. I thought about it. Looked at Ellen. She nodded slightly. Saturday, I said. 10 a.m., the diner on Forest Avenue. I'll be there, thank you, Dad. Saturday came. I arrived early. Ordered coffee, waited. Blake showed up exactly on time. He looked different, thinner, harder, like someone who'd worked real shifts and earned real paychecks. We ordered breakfast, talked carefully at first, about weather, about work, about nothing important. Then Blake set down his fork. Richard showed up at the hardware store last week. Oh? He was buying supplies, looked terrible, started ranting about you, how you destroyed him, how it was all your fault. What did you tell him? I told him the truth, that he destroyed himself, that you just held up a mirror. We ate in silence for a minute. I've been thinking about Father's Day, Blake said, about that watch. It wasn't about the money, it was about what it represented. I treated you like you didn't matter. Like your whole life didn't matter. Yes. And you showed me that I was wrong, that you do matter, that everyone matters. Yes. Blake's eyes were wet. I'm sorry. Not because my life fell apart, but because I hurt you, because I chose wrong, because I forgot who my real family was. I looked at him, saw something I hadn't seen in years: sincerity, growth, change. Apology accepted, I said. Relief washed over his face. Can we start over? No, we can't go back. But we can start building something new, slowly, honestly. Blake nodded. I'd like that. We finished breakfast, split the check, walked out into the cold November morning. As we reached our cars, Blake turned. The watch, do you still have it? In my garage. I'd like to buy you a new one, a real one, when I can afford it. Keep your money. The one you gave me works fine. It tells time. That's all I need. Blake looked confused. The watch wasn't the problem, Blake. It was what it represented. And that's been fixed. We shook hands. His grip was firm. Working man's grip. He drove away in a used sedan. I drove home to Ellen. She was in the kitchen making lunch. I came up behind her, wrapped my arms around her waist. How did it go? Good. Real good. Think he's changed? Maybe. Time will tell. Ellen turned in my arms, kissed me. You did good, Norm. You stood up for yourself, for us, for what was right. We did good. That night, I sat in the garage, looked at the cheap watch on my workbench, picked it up, turned it over. The price sticker was still there, $14.99. I smiled, put it back exactly where it belonged. The watch wasn't garbage. It was a trophy, a reminder that I'd won, that I'd taken control, that I'd made them understand. Blake had tried to erase me. Richard had tried to use me. Both had learned the same lesson. You don't underestimate a mechanic. We know how things work. We know how to take them apart. We know how to fix them. And we know how to break them when necessary. I turned off the garage light, walked back inside. Ellen was waiting with 2 glasses of wine. We sat on the couch. Didn't talk, didn't need to. Outside, the city lights flickered. Cars passed on the street. The world kept turning, and I was exactly where I wanted to be. Victorious, free, respected. The man who got his revenge and never regretted it for a single moment.